Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode with Merging Minds. My name is Gabriel Fairman, and today our guest is Jesse Showalter, a freelance UI UX designer and online educator. You've probably watched his popular YouTube channel with almost 400K subscribers, where he shares videos about design, code, and life. He's the founder of Good Fight Creative Co., a trusted product design partner for fast-growing startups, agencies, and entrepreneurs. And he's a thinker, creative enthusiast. Jesse, thank you so much for being on the show with us. Really appreciate your presence.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Excited about the conversation.
Jesse, would before we dive into, let's say, the meat and bones of how you see AI reshaping our world, in particular your creative world, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to be where you are?
Sure. Yeah. I have been in the creative industry for about 16 years. I started in traditional print design, a self-taught designer, reading a lot of Photoshop blogs. Not proud, but not sad to say that I started with a bootleg, like cracked version of Photoshop 8 to try to figure out how to do design work. And from there, I just started kind of learning and growing each and every day, challenging myself. And so, entry level kind of print design turned into my first internship and mentorship, into my first paid role, into design agencies, marketing agencies. I've worked freelance. I have worked for large companies like Apple and Google and Nike. And now I have taken that 16 years of experience, and I'm currently running my own boutique, kind of almost solopreneur, but have some outsourced individuals, doing a lot of, like you said, product design for startups, agencies, entrepreneurs, and then giving back to the design community. So my journey has been a long one. Probably, I'm sure there's people way smarter than me that figured things out way quicker than me, but I've enjoyed my journey over the last 16 years and everything that I've learned.
Nice. And when you talk about like the Good Fight Co., what is it? What is different or unique about what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. So I think what's unique and different, I probably the best way to present it would be by sheer comparison of how I used to do work as a freelancer, as a solopreneur, kind of trying to take on any and all clients that came. I really found my niche and my area where I really excel. And not only that, but I found the processes, the systems, and the people that help me to facilitate that really, really well. So we only do mobile and web product design, that's UI and UX, for startups. And when I say startups, I mean usually kind of early seed startups. They maybe have a small round of funding they're looking to get from their, MVP to a polished V1. Those are kind of my people. Because I've worked in the startup space and with so many different types of clients, I've realized I can solve their problem very, very well. And so what's kind of unique about it is we only work on monthly retainers. We are kind of the creative arm for teams like that don't have their own creative aspect. They haven't made their first creative hire, but they need their stuff to not look like crap. So it's this real weird space where they're not ready to hire a senior product designer for anywhere between 180 to 240K a year, but they can come on with me from anywhere between 5 to 10K a month, and we can sprint them to where they need to be over a span of 4 to 8 months.
It's interesting. I mean, would you say that part of the benefit or consequence of having a 16-year trajectory was being able to really laser focus on the thing that you most enjoy? Or because one of the things that to me is really cool about what you're saying is it's a very specific problem that you solve for a very specific audience that you focus on, compared to a lot of agencies that kind of like do whatever kind of comes their way. How would you say this level of specificity plays out in terms of your own satisfaction, the results you deliver? Like, I'd love to know about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I love solving problems first and foremost. Like that's my big thing. So I'm not an artist. If you ask me to sketch something or paint something right now, it's probably going to come out like stick figures. But I was the kid who, when I got a remote control car as a child, I immediately disassembled it and tried to reassemble it and put it back together because I like understanding how things work. And I like being able to solve those things in a repetitive way. So for me, design is not about art. Design is about problem solving. And once I realized that, yes, I can keep trying to solve anybody and everybody's problems, but I have to constantly learn what that problem is, it makes me less efficient. It makes me really shallow and wide. What I'd rather do is get very deep and very narrow about solving specific problems. And that makes me really fast at solving those problems, really experienced at those problems. And therefore, it makes me very, very valuable to my clientele. So one of the best compliments I can hear, and I often hear, is when I get on a 15 to 20-minute call with one of my current clients that's on retainer, and they're asking me questions, they're sharing issues, and I've seen that problem dozens and dozens, sometimes hundreds of times. So now I can simply, instead of having to go back and strategize and think through, what I can do is actually solve that problem with them on a call using my 16 years of experience within a few sentences. And one of the best phrase or compliments I'll ever hear is, wow, it's so worth it. That's why we pay you what we pay you, because it's worth it. Because I've said no to all the chaff. I just laser focus on specific things. So I like really helping people. And I find that I do that in that very exclusive, specific, narrow way.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think I have two follow-up questions for you. One, when you put the cars back together, were you like me who put them back together, but they didn't quite work the same way anymore, or did they work
Yeah. There was
flawlessly?
always extra screws and pieces, and 100%, not saying I was perfect at that at all, but I actually enjoyed the process, which was kind of
Yeah,
my thing.
no, I definitely love I identify with it. I mean, I was definitely tearing stuff apart when I was growing up, but there was always like an extra screw missing. There was always something that didn't quite come together in the same way. And I was always puzzled and at the same time a bit too lazy to try to disassemble it all again
Right.
and rebuild it all again. But I kind of wish that I had that patience. But anyway, and I think the second question that I have is I think what you're talking about, specificity and clarity, right? Those things are kind of correlated very closely. But from a marketing perspective, I think part of the drama that people feel is when you become more specific. In many ways, it's harder to find the clients who are looking, because then you start narrowing down the exact client that you're looking for, the exact problem that you're solving, and it seems that like if you're good at content marketing, that kind of approach ends up paying huge dividends because you know how to, let's say, put stuff out there that allows the right people to find you. Would you say that that's true, or do you think those things are like not related?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It was this last, I would say, like 3 years has been kind of a revolution of the way that I think about doing business, because before I had I struggled with a couple things. I struggled with being a people pleaser, with having a limited mindset, with having a scarcity mindset. And that led me to have these kind of like open vectors or open trajectories of I'll take anything and everything. And that hurt me for a really long time. But in these last 3, maybe actually 4 years, who have really kind of niche down and laser focused, what it's allowed me to do is escape out of that limited or scarcity mindset. So the truth is, there are thousands of clients, there are millions of clients. And instead of trying to promote myself to all of them and probably not being a fit for most of them, what I would rather do is limit my services and make myself very exclusive in the way that I operate. And so when people are searching for a certain thing, they find me. And so that's when you kind of talked about like marketing, like from a marketing perspective, or even just from a messaging perspective, I would much rather be highly attractive to a smaller pool than barely attractive to a massive pool. We feel like that's going to be better. We feel like the big pool is probably where we need to be, but it's that small pool with very clear messaging and very very clear value propositions that really starts to elevate you in that tiny pond. So I'd rather be the king of a tiny pond any day.
No, I mean, I resonate with that. I admire that. I think it's interesting that you bring up this whole idea of mindset, and particularly like the scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset, and how that plays into marketing. Because the parallel that I make is, I'm not super familiar with marketing agencies, but I'm very familiar with translation agencies, and they share, from what I know, a very common DNA, which is customers king, right? If you basically, that's the definition of an agency. You have to please your customers, and they come up and they have a brief on a website, and now all of a sudden you're doing websites, and now they have something in mobile UX. Now you're doing mobile UX. Now they have maybe an email marketing campaign that needs to go out, and you kind of like companies like they tend to branch out horizontally. What I love about what you said is that I never correlated that with this scarcity mindset, which kind of is anything that comes your way, you kind of have to, deal with it, as opposed to you deciding, no, this is what I'm going to be good at. And can you talk a little bit about that leap of faith or that change in mindset and how that was for you?
Yeah, really interesting. I actually was very fortunate and fortunate enough to have close friendships and kind of like network opportunities with people who had already made that big leap of faith. Specifically, a friend of mine who worked in the SEO industry for years and years, kind of beat her head against the wall, trying to be all things to all people and run an SEO agency until she realized what she really loved was a certain type of client that she had gotten, and that was in the wedding industry. So she kind of like really niched down on SEO for the wedding industry. That means she only does SEO for wedding photographers, wedding venues, wedding coordinators, wedding planners, only and only those people. And what she saw was a 10x of her business, so much so that her win to fail ratio for clients started to skyrocket. She started winning 100% of anybody that came into her funnel. So what did she do? She doubled her prices and she still had a high win ratio. She continued to double her prices. Now, all of a sudden, she went from a posture of, oh, I hope I could get a client to they come to me for who I am. Not I'm hoping that you'll let me do work for you, but instead you're gonna have to really hope you can get into my schedule because I have the experience, I have the know-how, I have the processes that you need. So that transition, I was just very fortunate to be kind of around people who have already who made those switches and saw that success. It's kind of for me one of the biggest reasons why networking, mentorship, business relationships, also just kind of the rule of reciprocity, just putting yourself out there matters so much because you'll learn so many things that challenge things like a scarcity mindset or a limited kind of like mindset. So for me, that was the big piece. The second piece was starting to care less about design and actually care more about business and start to realize that just because my business is a freelance design business or whatever it is, doesn't make it any different than traditional businesses. So I started just reading really boring business books. And this is this is funny when people ask me like, what's the hack to growing your business? I'm like, read the most boring business books and educate yourself so that you understand that like at the end of the day my clients don't care what their website looks like or what their mobile app looks like. They could care less what color of the button. They could care. None of those things matter at the end of the day. What matters is right return on investment, revenue, like sales, leads, traffic, conversion. Those things matter. So I had to start realizing that my ego, my portfolio, all of that stuff is like my portfolio is there. It matters, but it's not the end all be all because like Mr. Miyagi said to Daniel LaRusso, hey, you know karate, somebody always knows more karate, right? So I could be the best designer in the world, I think, but there's always somebody who's a better designer or doing something new. So what's going to be my X factor? It can't be design, even though I'm in design, right? In the area of design, it has to be good business tactics. It has to be clear messaging. It has to be good business relationships. So that's kind of the thing that made me go, oh, it's not just about the work that I do. It is the type of problems I solve and how I show that to people. And I can do that if I release myself from this limited mindset and start to really see that this is how business kind of works and functions.
That's super inspiring. But I want to highlight like this paradox that you're talking about, which is the more you narrow down and restrict your audience, you actually get inversely positive business
Yeah.
results. That's like an interesting leap of faith. And I think, at least I don't know if you resonate with this, but for me, Jesse, it's also the same applies in life in the sense that the more you become, let's say, clear on your values and the people that you want to be with and the kinds of things that you want to be doing, the more, in some ways, that restricts, let's say, the people that you're willing to be in touch with, but that also conversely, like, maximizes your experience with them. Would you agree? Do you think those things are separate?
I think this is a universal principle of life. And I might get a little bit existential here as I kind of like speak to it, but like I believe that less is more. I believe that minimalism is the key. I believe that the art of subtraction is very, very difficult because we have a addition and multiplication kind of mindset. We need more, we want more. And so we're never satisfied unless we have more. But the art of subtraction actually frees us. Discipline actually leads us to freedom. So, for instance, I have tons of freedom of time because I'm hyper disciplined and selective about what I do with my calendar and with my time slots. And that might seem very, very limiting to some people, but to me, it really frees up the mental, like my mental capacity to do the things I need to quickly and efficiently and get to other things. Same thing, like I go to bed fairly early in comparison to other people. Like I'm kind of a 9 p.m., 8:45 wind down and go to bed kind of person. And I'm more of a 4:45 or 5 o'clock wake up in the morning kind of person. That might seem very limited. And I have to say no to a lot of opportunities on Fridays and Saturdays because, sorry, I got to get to bed. I got stuff to do in the morning. That might seem very limiting to some people, very like, ooh, like you're not having fun. But what it allows me to do is I'm always refreshed in the morning. I'm always ready to go. And I actually end my days at around 2:30. But I have other people that stay up late, are exhausted in the middle of the day, are not productive, and they don't get off until 6:30 or 7 o'clock. And they're wondering why they're on this trail. So I think this is a universal principle, right? I think restaurants, for example, that have 120 things on the menu, like the old mom and pop Italian restaurant, that's cognitive over. I would prefer a bistro that has a little paper menu and 4 options. Do you want the chicken? Do you want the fish? Do you want the beef? Do you want the lamb? I go, what a wonderful experience this is because they've practiced the art of subtraction. This is why most hyper successful people don't spend a lot of time worrying about what they're going to wear, right? The old Mark Zuckerberg like adage is just wear the same thing every day. I don't have to put like mental capacity into it. So the more things you can strip out of your life, the more powerful your purpose and your mission is. I think that's universal.
I resonate with that. That's really cool. And in the motif of paradoxes, how do you see AI? Is it in enabling more creativity, less creativity? Where does it fall, and how do you use it?
Yeah, that's great. I love the AI question because I think a lot of people are either on far ends of the spectrum. They think it's the plot line to Terminator 2. It's going to steal our jobs, take over the world, so on and so forth. And other people just think it's going to be all fairy dust and fun. And I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. And I'll tell you kind of where I'm at right now. Right now, I'm fairly excited about it because I think that what AI does really, really well is solve already established problems. And if you're somebody like me who solves a lot of the same problems, and the execution of solving those problems requires a lot of minutia, then I'm very, very excited about that because as a friend of mine, Dan Mall, said while I was interviewing him, AI is not trying to steal your job. It's actually trying to give you a promotion if you're in the creative industry. Because if I can solve problems with my words and then allow AI to do all the pixel pushing, all the arranging, all the alignment of layers, all the naming of layers, all the adding of content for me, then what I get paid for is actually my high level strategy. So it's trying to take most people who are junior or mid level designers and turn them into senior level creatives, creative directors, art directors who are solving large problems. Now, here's where, in my opinion, the danger does actually come in. I have replaced certain people in my business with AI and automation because it's more efficient, it's more cost effective. So if the value that you offer right now is nothing more than minutia, then yes, your role is in danger. You need to learn how to solve bigger problems. So case in point, I had somebody because I have a YouTube channel, I create content. I had somebody maybe last year who was cutting up long form content into short form content. I paid him maybe 500-600 bucks a month to make me 8 to 10 of these transitions or reproducing of this content from long to short. And I worked with him for 8 or 9 months, and I found a great AI tool for $29.99 a month. It's going to do the same thing, and it does it within 15 to 20 minutes. And I don't need to communicate with any person. I don't need to give a lot of feedback. I just run my video through it, and it's going to spit out 8 to 10 beautiful short form pieces of content. But what was the value that individual was offering me? It was a lot of this. It was a lot of minutia. It was a lot of taking the thing I had already done and clipping and cutting and exporting. I don't need somebody to do that for me. I can let machines do that for me because it's not high level strategy. So that's the reality of where it's at. And so what I'm using it, or how I'm using AI in my business right now is I'm using it for anything that doesn't necessarily need a human touch. Like for instance, I have an executive assistant. Gabriel, You interacted with my actual human executive assistant while you were booking me for this podcast. Because for me, could I use AI for maybe some automation in certain ways? Yes, and I do in certain aspects of administration of my business. But I prefer personal touch, and what I get out of that is most people complimenting my me for having such a fabulous executive assistant, because she communicates well, she's caring, she's empathetic, she works well. Like, so to me, that's a valuable asset. And so the human touch is always going to be important in my business. And I think in everybody's business, especially large businesses that could get lost in automation and impersonal kind of ways of marketing and messaging. They're going to have to make sure they really hold on to personal touch. I think that's hyper valuable. But where I am using AI is in areas where I don't need that hyper personal touch. I need minutia done. I need a lot of the kind of like laborious, tedious work. I'm going to outsource that to AI. Like note taking for meetings and scheduling certain things and onboarding certain things, automating tasks inside of job boards and using Zapier to move things around and information. I don't, that's just such clinical, boring work. I don't wish that on somebody. I don't want people to be moving data for me from table to table. I want better for them. Actually, I want them to do cooler stuff. So I'm not going to give that to people.
I love the perspective. I do want to challenge you a little bit on this because I think it works well for people like you who are in many ways welcoming the displacement and seeing the opportunity in it and seeing, basically what you're describing. What I hear is like, this tech allows me to be more of the person I want to be. So less focus, like you. And again, I identify with you. Like I'm less of a. If you ask me if I'd like to be copying and pasting things, if I'd like to be doing any kind of more manual, repetitive work, I would probably rather die. But I just really don't like it. But I also appreciate the fact that there are millions and millions of people who have built their lives around what you call minutia. And build, like maybe learning how to take amazing notes during a meeting, or maybe being that executive assistant, or being maybe going from long form to short form content, and or maybe even a little bit more complex tasks, but maybe just don't feel comfortable operating because the skills that you have, for instance, is clear. Like you're a great communicator, you're very organized, have a lot of clarity, a lot of you know how to pair really complex things together. All of that gives you a lot of edge, and you use that edge, and therefore, I mean, at least where AI is now, clearly you feel like it's a tool and not a competitor. But for a lot of people, it is a competitor. And I guess my question to you is, what would you say to them? How do they? What's your advice?
Yeah, I think so. Whenever there is a large technological revolution, there will always be those that cling to the past, that cling to what they know, to cling to what has been. So, for instance, the chariot was a massive technological advance in history, right? The wheel was a massive technological advance. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. The internet was probably one of the most recent massive technological advances that changed the world. Before that, you had to go to the library, you had to go to the university. There was places where information was gate kept, and the internet actually turned that on its head. It completely revolutionized the way that we access information, learn new things. There was plenty of people, actually, I told the story the other day to a friend, when the internet, quote unquote, came out, when I got the internet, I had a dial-up modem in my old, like my Apple II. And the first time I accessed the internet in that way, I told my teacher at school, and he said, that's a big waste of time. You're wasting your time with it. Why don't you just take the weekend and just get through it and then get back to reality? Because he saw it as something you could finish, you could get through. And there's plenty of people, once the internet launched, went, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to double down on what I know. And those people are outdated. Another great case in point, streaming music. Some people might take issue with Spotify and Apple Music's ethics and the way that they actually give proceeds to artists. There's a whole conversation around that. And you can have that conversation. It's a healthy conversation. We could totally say we need to move in a better direction there. But you cannot argue that streaming music is the most beneficial way to distribute and consume music in 2024. But you know who argues that? Garth Brooks. You know what's really sad? Garth Brooks was the second most highest selling like artist in the world, right behind Michael Jackson. And now my daughter's 13. She doesn't know who Garth Brooks is because his music is only available in solid format in Walmart because he fought against the technology. And so here with the revolution of AI, yeah, there's a lot of people who are going to get left in the dust. But here's my thing, and maybe it's just because of my experience. I think, and especially now more than ever, anybody can learn just about anything because of the internet and AI, because we have been part of this information revolution, this technology revolution. You have the opportunity to change. It's just the limited mindset that says, I don't want to, it's going to be too hard to. Your pool will slowly but surely start drying up. It's better to get out of the old pool and jump into this new unfamiliar space of waters now than it is to wait until you're gasping for water in the old pool you were at. So yes, a lot of people are, those pools are going to dry up, but it's better to start working on it now. It took me years to learn how to design on my own, self-taught. It took a lot of failure. It took a lot of late nights, but that's what people are going to have to do in the midst of technological revolutions. One more little kind of adage, and AI makes me think of the old story of John Henry. John Henry was the American fable hero who laid train tracks. And when the steam engine came to town, John Henry challenged the steam engine to see who could lay railroad tracks faster. And in the story, it's unfortunately kind of sad. John Henry works himself so hard that he dies and the steam engine wins. My question is always, how much train track would have been laid if John Henry got together and paired with the steam engine? What would that have looked like? That type of dedication mixed with that type of technology, how would that have transformed like transportation in the fable, American transportation, massively? And so I think when people are afraid and think it has to be me or AI, I'm saying, what happens if it's us with AI and we go for a ride? That's my thought.
I love the examples you gave, particularly to marketing and creative space, because I see a big analogy with translators, and translators also work for agencies. They take tasks for a very long time. I would say probably for the last 40 years. The main task for a translator was to, number one, you had to type. You had to type a lot, right? You had to do a lot of typing so that you could render text from one. And I mean, even before the computer, I mean, before with typewriters and before typewriters with rewriting, but there's this effort in rewriting that's for the most part gone. Now it becomes much more a task of editing. And then in with editing, for instance, it's interesting. It's the same thing that I see in English with drafting. Like the requirements for your first draft aren't going to be the same as your final draft. And with each editing round, you better get, pickier and more selective about the things that you're focusing on, so that you focus on those like little changes that make a big impact on your text.
Right.
And if you, I don't know, I imagine you like to write based on how you've described yourself. I like to write. And when I write, for instance, I'm not particularly afraid of of having that responsibility, that burden, that editorial burden. Same as you described with your strategic burden, as far as like pointing your clients in the right direction and not necessarily like being the one pixelating stuff up and down. But in your opinion, is this a matter of education, or is this a matter of mindset? Both. I mean, for people who do feel stuck and are like looking at this and like, I'm like, okay, I used to be a great typist. I used to be someone who was really good at relaying information back and forth. Now more is expected of me. And sometimes they look in the mirror, and right now they're not seeing the mindset, and they're also not seeing the educational background to be able to do that shift. Where do you go? What do you do?
Yeah, that's good. I tend to focus, because you can't tell the future. You can't tell what's going to happen. You can't tell what's going to be valuable and not valuable in the future. I tend to focus on really like one step at a time type of like individual improvement. So if there's something I don't understand, it's very, very difficult and overwhelming if you're trying to get from step A to Z, but A to B doesn't feel so bad. Right. And B to C and C to D. So I like to like take these ideas here, like that you were kind of talking about, which is, is it education? Is it mindset? I encourage people always to start breaking those down piece by piece and saying, hey, listen, like honest assessment is probably a good place to start. Right. I think that there is an opportunity for people to improve, to grow, to change, to add new skill sets, new tools to their toolbox. And you have to start assessing first on what's missing in the toolbox for you to accomplish any project you're working on. And that project could be how you want to grow your career, or how you want to grow your family, or whatever it is. You're thinking, okay, what pieces are missing here? Some honest self-assessment can be very, very helpful. Like, hey, listen, like my life is built on me doing things with these two hands. Well, what happens if something happens to these two hands? I have no other skill or value to offer here besides what I can do with these two hands. So I'm going to need to introduce something to kind of like back up this process that I have, or these capabilities I have. So I think leveraging like the information that we have now, the internet, AI, the trajectory that we see, it's good to start comparing a little bit. Hey, what's my goals, and what's missing? What would I like to do in the next 5 to 10 years, and what's missing there? And we might be able to pull like some threads out from that matrix and kind of assess them and say, I need to really start focusing on this a little bit more. And that could be as simple as, and I'll just use my industry because that's obviously the industry that I know best. Or actually, maybe I'll challenge myself and speak to the translating industry because I don't know a whole lot about that. But I would say that it's probably similar, right? If you're stuck translating all day, if that's your thing, all you do is translate all day, and you see that on the horizon, like for instance, tools like Framer and Webflow can localize and translate your entire website through localization tools in an instant click, you see the threat, you see the danger, right? You assess the fact that your livelihood is based on something that computers and AI are now doing. Well, I need to figure out not a new thing, but how can I expand upon my current thing? Where can I raise value and go from the equivalent of junior designer to creative director? So translation maybe is not going to be it, but how do I add more of a human touch? How do I add more insights? How do I add more something on top of that? So I'm not just a translator. I'm not just John Henry trying to compete with the steam engine, but instead I'd love to learn what it looks like maybe to program and like work on localization, to be a part of a team that does that. I'd love to like talk about what it means to be a bilingual content marketer and somebody who writes really, really powerful human copy. So I hyper encourage people not to abandon their industry and go and find what's new. I have a very entrepreneurial mindset though. I would encourage people to take everything you know and start applying it to that next level, and figuring out what is that next level for your industry or your skill set. So it's some of that is a limited mindset. Some of that is, and here's again what I love. You said education, tons of education. There's so much education right now. I'm working with a client for my agency that is in the oil and gas like industry. I know nothing about natural gas and oil. I have zero information, but she makes great content on the topic. So I started watching some of her content, and I'm not going to become an oil and gas engineer overnight, but I binged an hour and a half worth of her content, and I knew enough about the topic to now speak intelligently with her during our client meetings. All of a sudden, like I've educated myself at least to the point where I'm dangerous, at least enough to where I can make some mistakes and sound stupid in front of her. That's a good progress. That's a good like a good goal to have, and that's the type of progress I think we can all make. So education, 100%, and there's so much of it out there and available. And not to hate on the current college, university, or education system, but I would say in 2024, there's no reason, unless you're going to be a doctor, lawyer, something in that capacity, there's not a whole lot of reasons to enter those types of traditional university kind of scenarios, because so much of it can be done and found online.
No, that makes a lot of sense, Jesse, all of what you said. But I think there's a key thing about what you're saying. Like you describe yourself as an entrepreneur. And I think as an entrepreneur, like you put in a lot of emphasis and responsibility on yourself. So even I love the example in education, right? It's like you're not looking at the college as the educating institution. You're looking at yourself as the learner. And maybe you can learn just as much by reading stuff on the web. Maybe you don't need, teachers telling you what assignments to do and the grades that you're getting to be able to learn. But most people aren't entrepreneurs, and you seem also very intuitive as well. And again, based on the very few interactions that we've had, if I would have to place you like on the distribution curve, you're probably not on the middle, and most people are on the middle. And I guess my question is, how do you become more of an entrepreneur? Like, how do you take at least steps that make you feel more comfortable taking those risks, particularly like you said, like you look at trends, you look at directions, and you anticipate them. A lot of people, like, they're really, like you were saying, they're gonna really wait for things to be like at a no possibility point to change. How
Yeah.
do you train your mind? How do you do things to like become more of an entrepreneur in that sense?
Yeah, I was not an entrepreneur at all. I was the kid that took things apart, but I was not the kid that built a lemonade stand or tried to, like build a business mowing lawns as a kid. I wasn't that kid. So, but I would say that I find two character traits that are highly learnable, that are available to everybody, that require no sort of genetic gift or skill. It's just something you have to commit yourself to. Those two traits, in my opinion, are curiosity and resourcefulness. So, curiosity, they say, killed the cat. I think curiosity actually builds the large majority of entrepreneurs, in my opinion, because if you are curious, if you if you listen and ask more questions just in life and make that a habit of life. If I have kids, I don't know, I thought I heard maybe some sweet voices in the background. You have kids as well. Spend some A lot of us who are in our 20s, 30s, and 40s, we forget what it looks like or feels like to be a kid. And when we were kids, we were hyper curious. And I don't know about your kids, but when my kids were young, the why question was the primary question that was asked. And as we get older, we stop asking why, right? We start asking how. Tell me how to do it. Tell me what I have to do. Tell me how I have to do it. We stop asking why. But kids will ask why to the simplest of things. Hey, you need to clean your room. Why? Well, because you need it to be clean. Why? Well, because having a clean room is good. Why? They are intrigued and they are curious. They ask about everything around them. And we start to just forget the joy of being curious as we get older. So if you can just remind yourself, make it a goal just to be curious and ask why. Well, why do I have to work at this job? Like, why is this the only way? Like, why am I waiting on a manager to give me a raise? Why am I all of these challenging questions, these why questions actually start to break down limited mindset purely from being more curious, right? You start asking yourself like, well, this for some reason this other person who's freelancing is doing a really, really good job and they're thriving and I'm not. Why? Now you start trying to figure out and reverse engineer other people's success. This is the fast path, in my opinion, to becoming an entrepreneur and kind of like breaking down, getting maybe away from that bell curve you were saying of normal interaction and behavior, starting to become a little bit more entrepreneurial is just the curiosity. But curiosity alone, I don't think will get you there because curiosity starts the ball rolling, but you need to execute upon things. And while we can all execute, I think often the excuses that we give ourselves, which is, I can't, it's not the right time, I'm not the right person, I don't have the right training. So when you slam resourcefulness, which my definition for resourcefulness is making it work no matter what, figuring it the hell out. That's my definition of resourcefulness. So if I'm curious and I say why, and I go, oh man, your business is working and mine's not, why? I'm going to reverse engineer. I go, oh, well, I'm not smart enough and you've been in the game longer than me. So there's probably all sorts of excuses. No, my attitude needs to be, I don't know why, but I'm going to freaking figure it out. I'm going to spend the time. I'm going to read the books. I'm going to pray the prayers. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to build the ugly interfaces until they stop being ugly. I encourage people all the time is especially if they're getting in design, because I mentor a lot of young designers and they go, what course should I take? Should I take your course? And I go, I have a course. Please, if you want to take it. But can I just can I hurt myself and get you to not buy my course and just tell you the best way to learn is just to start designing ugly things, just to start making, creating, and getting stuck and being resourceful and getting through it. And then you start doing it a little bit enough or doing it enough where you can find somebody, a friend, a family member, an aunt, an uncle, and go, hey, I've been making ugly stuff. Could I make some ugly stuff for you? Maybe. And it's just, I don't know how, but I'm going to figure it out. Right. You put those two things together and it is like the Greek word is like dynamis. It's like where we get our word dynamite. It's like, it is powerful if you can just do those two things. And I think that people tend to make excuses and rationalize. They just say like, I wasn't born in the right place. I don't have the right skills. I don't know that thing. I don't have a mentor. I didn't go to that school. And in my opinion, 99% of that is excuses. occasionally there's a true thing where, man, life has dealt you a bad hand of cards. The timing's not right. I get it. Those things happen. But we tend to make that 1% the rule for everybody. And in my opinion, it's excuses for a large amount of people.
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with that. I believe in, like you, I'm a big believer in curiosity, and I think one thing in what you pointed out, Jesse, is like the nuance of curiosity, right? It's one thing to ask the question why, and for instance, like, why does my life suck? Just because I suck, or whatever. But not with curiosity. The same why is a different intent. It's really like, why? Like, let me really try to be inquisitive. Let me really try to understand, not just go for the simple answers. So I think that is a big deal, and I think that kind of goes along with the idea of resourcefulness, right? It's not just asking questions to get the simple answers, but it's asking questions to get the answers that will get you moving in the right direction. And that's why I love the idea of dynamis that you propose, because like they go hand in hand, right? Just asking questions and not being resourceful, you're not going to be asking the right questions. And if you're,
Right.
and if you're just resourceful, not asking questions, you're not going to be moving in the right direction. So
Can I just add one little thing
please,
onto that? Because
of course.
I feel like two of those feel like very much so like personal, like character traits or things you need to kind of apply in your life. But here's like one tool, I think, that if I was going to lay out like a tool, and I don't mean like software, but like something in that you need in your life to help you really like walk along with those two characteristics. The steroids, the superpower is accountability, right? Like you can ask, why am I fat? Why am I overweight? Why am I out of shape? Oh, it's because I'm not working out. I'm not doing these things. Then you might say, well, I don't have a gym membership. I don't have money. So I guess I'll start running. But getting an accountability partner, saying, hey, friend of mine, would you hold me accountable to this? I'm going to run 4 days a week. Will you ask me how that went? Can I get a trainer? Can I get a dietitian? Can I get somebody to just get in my face and hold me accountable? If you can have accountability in your life, it's the thing that will just amplify those two characteristics, in my opinion. This is why I think like people building in public, starting businesses, and documenting their journey on social media is a beautiful thing, because they go, I'm going to do this thing. And then they feel this responsibility to show up and report back how it's going. And that is hyper embarrassing if you wake up 10 days in a row and go, I didn't do anything else today, or you just stop showing up. It's like there's a weightiness to it. And I think a lot of times we don't put ourselves on the line.
I love that, and I think it's a beautiful way to wrap things, because I think it all comes together. Everything that you've been saying, like this idea of challenging yourself, putting yourself on the line, holding yourself accountable, being resourceful, being curious, and ultimately going back to the beginning of the conversation around the idea of really abandoning a scarcity mindset and moving into a more empowered one. But this was really amazing, Jesse. Thank you for all the insights. It's very inspiring to be able to talk to you. And if people want to be able to get in touch with you, get to know more of your work, where should people go? What should people do to get to know more about you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, jesseshowalter.com. I have all the details on other places you can find me. I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jesse Showalter. And I have a creative community. It's free to join if you want. It's called Design Champs. You can find that at designchamps.io. That's where I spend a lot of time mentoring, teaching, and equipping other creatives and entrepreneurs and freelancers.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jesse, for being here with us. It's been immense learning experience for me. And till next time, till next Emerging Minds. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.